Okay.
All right, everyone, welcome. So, I think we need to.
So which time are we looking at?
Yeah, this one. So,
okay.
Just mute that. Yeah. So, welcome for episode 9. I'm extremely delighted to have one of the most recognizable persons in Singapore, Professor Tambyah. He's a world-renowned epidemiologist, and of course, more importantly for today's session, he's the chairman of, I would say, still the second most important opposition party in Singapore, the Singapore Democratic Party, SDP. And Professor Paul, welcome to. I know you love Bukit Panjang, but welcome to the best side of Singapore.
Thank you. I have to tell you, I'm late because I got lost. And that's what happens when people in the west and center travel to the east.
Yes.
I always get lost. And Gerald had to come and rescue me.
Yeah, so I mean, you can feel, right, the air is fresher in the east. All right, so let's get to it. So the first question I have, this is the first time actually that I'm hosting someone who has been POFMA before.
Okay.
In Singapore. So can you tell us a little bit about your experience of being POFMA and how do you feel about it?
Yeah, well, it's very interesting. The SDP had a POFMA against it, and this was related to the manpower statistics. Then after that, during the elections, we had another POFMA, and that was related to the 10 million population. But the statement that I made during the interview with PJ Tham and also with, for the Online Citizen and at the NUSS event, we didn't get POFMA for that. And this is the weird thing about POFMA, is that the people who published it, and in fact that's the first time I think that one of the mainstream media outlets, CNA Online, got POFMA, and so did TOC and so did New Narrative. But SDP didn't get POFMA because we never published it. So it's a really weird law, and in fact, to be honest, I think most of us who have been POFMA view it as a badge of honor. It suggests that the ruling party takes you seriously as somebody who's of influence, and also it tells me that they can't really find any arguments to argue against you, so they're forced to resort to POFMA. When POFMA first came out, we were told that it was supposed to combat dangerous extremist statements that had to be rapidly shut down, otherwise there would be religious and racial riots. But in our experience, it's been used long after the event. They talked about, the first time the SDP got POFMA was when we did a report of our population policy, and they were talking about the manpower statistics. And frankly, it took a really long time for them to do it. But I can't go into the details because this is actually under the Court of Appeal. We've done our application there. So hopefully we'll get a favorable judgment from the court, and that will be the end of that. And maybe they'll stop using POFMA.
Right.
People.
Okay. So I know you said POFMA is sort of a badge of honor, but I don't want that badge of honor. Hopefully, hopefully we don't get that. We don't get POFMA today.
I'll try my best.
So no, in principle, I agree with you, and I don't know if you know, I was one of the signatories to for the letter to the Minister of Education on POFMA and academics voicing out our concerns.
Right.
However, if I were to play devil's advocate, right, as a medical doctor yourself and going through the early days of the pandemic, there was a lot of misinformation that was spreading. Wouldn't you think that POFMA was a good tool to have for the government during the days
No,
of
I don't think so. And in fact, the reality is a lot of the misinformation came from the authorities, and it was because of incomplete information. So the WHO initially, they said there's no person-to-person transmission. Now we've got how many tens of millions of people infected. So it was because of incomplete information, and because they depended on the information that came out of the authorities in Wuhan. So this is a point that some academics have pointed out, is that just because you're an authority doesn't mean you're immune from making a false statement, or a statement which subsequently turns out to be untrue.
Right.
It's like
but it's not a false statement, right?
It is a false statement.
It was based on incomplete information.
Yeah, but they could have said, this is what the Chinese government says, we don't really believe them, or this is the evidence for that. And so, what happens in science, as you know, and even in social science, you present a theory, a hypothesis, and somebody tries to reproduce your experiment, and either you're validated or you're debunked. And I mean, that's what academics do. So in a way, that's what happened. See, WHO said initially, according to the Chinese authorities, they didn't actually say according to the Chinese authorities. They said there's no person-to-person transmission in the first week or so of the reports of the virus, and subsequently that turned out to be untrue.
Right.
And so, so that was. And you know, nobody had to POFMA anybody.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
They made their case. The scientists from other parts of the world said we don't really believe that. Even from within China, there were scientists who said maybe that's not accurate. And eventually, the truth came out. So, you know.
Right. Okay. So hopefully we didn't stray into POFMA territory just now. Okay. So let's get to the crux of today's discussion. Right.
Sure.
So, you know, in first past the post and plurality systems, our party blogger or GRC system, right? Both the candidate and the party matters.
Sure.
And I think as far as candidate credibility goes, I mean, you're right up there, right? With any one of the opposition candidates from any party, right? So do you think if you were from a different party, not the SDP, you would have won and you would be a member of parliament, at the very least, an NCMP?
No, I don't think so. I think that, to be honest, if I was not from the SDP, I don't think I would have got 45% or 46% of the vote. Because frankly, the SDP has a machinery. You know, I mean, it's just incredible. In 9 days, they managed to put together 2 or was it 3 APAs with the live, audience. They had crowd control. They had a very sophisticated setup. And, I was surprised that we actually did as well as we did. Bear in mind that, I had been walking the ground in Holland Bukit Timah. So Bukit Panjang, although some of Bukit Panjang is in Holland Bukit Timah, I was relatively new to a lot of the people there. So for many of them, it's the first time they're seeing me. To be able to achieve that kind of number, I mean, in a crisis election with no rallies, I think a lot of that is due to the SDP.
Okay, but do you really think if you were in the WP, you would not have been a member of parliament?
I think so. And
really?
Yeah, and I'll tell you why. Part of the reason is that the SDP is unique in its branding, in its values, and its style, and I think it suits me. See, because these are the kind of things that are important to me. Civil liberties. I cut my teeth in Marua. Brema is the person who introduced me to civil society in Singapore, and it was a really good introduction. See, so human rights is front and center. That's how I got in. In fact, my wife says I'm more of an activist than a politician.
Wow.
And so where do the activists in Singapore hang out? With the SDP. See? So I think frankly, Jollivan is one of our members. We were the first people to come out with a statement in support of Solang when, after the by-election, when they went after her for this cooling off day. So, Suki is our assistant treasurer. I was at an SDP retreat, and one by one people started introducing themselves. So I'm so-and-so, and I was the cellmate of so-and-so during the 1987 Marxist conspiracy. So I think that's why SDP is sort of. I feel comfortable within the SDP because there are people who share my values, and there are people who are much more passionate than I am and have been through a lot more than I have. So I think if I was in any other party, a CV only goes so far. And we have people with very strong CVs who were candidates. Granted, this was a pandemic election, and pandemics are what I do for a living. But still, there's no reason why I think I would have been that great with any other party. Okay,
so if I heard you correctly, and I'm paraphrasing.
Sure.
So if leader of the opposition Pritam calls you to join WP, it'll be an emphatic no.
Well, he actually did that. To be honest, not recently. He did it a few years ago. He invited me.
Is this the first time this information is coming out? Or
oops.
Publicly?
Okay, sorry.
So I'm great.
You got
great. We got
okay.
school. Yeah. Straits Times didn't have that.
This was a few years ago. He invited me to have prawn noodles in some famous prawn noodle place in Katong. So again, to me, everything in the East is the same. I have to confess.
That's unfair.
I know, but what to do? I'm a Westerner. Okay, so it was a famous place. It was very good prawn noodles, and he was talking to me about what he was doing, and this was not long after he took over as Secretary General. Then at the end, my wife came and joined us, and as we were about to leave, he said, I think I would be remiss if, I think these are his exact words, if I didn't ask you whether you had ever thought of joining the WP. Then I said no, and he said, I thought so.
Oh, okay.
so it was kind of, I guess he was supposed to do that, so he did that,
Right.
being the loyal leader of the opposition that he is.
So this was when after you had joined SDP, right?
Yeah, this was after I ran in 2015.
Right.
He became,
so this was after 2015.
After 2015,
Right.
soon after he became secretary, and I dropped him a congratulatory note. Then he said, "How would you like to have some prawn mee?" So I said, "Okay, fine."
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
We have pretty good prawn mee in the West, though. I must tell you that.
Well, that part of the answer is a bit doubtful. The last one. So you said, before we get to the next question, you said the unique ideologies of the SDP, right? So
Right.
do you think now that the SDP has proven, the WP has proven that it can win seats, it's won 10 seats in this
Right.
election. So does that mean that the WP ideology is actually what Singaporeans want, and the SDP ideology has been, well, the SDP just is a bit more left, and it's a bit clearer and more distinct ideologically from the PAP, whereas WP is quite similar to the PAP in terms of...
You sound like Vivian.
Sorry to WP MPs and members, but I think that's not an unfair statement, as in it's WP is more similar to the PAP than SDP is.
I don't know, if you watch the parliament session that occurred, and it's really sad that we still can't live stream it. But looking at the speeches, they are pretty different from the PAP.
They are. They are. It's just that you are more different. Is that fair?
Well, it's all different shades of
different.
different shades of different. Yeah.
Right. So would you say that the SDP ideology is the one that has been rejected by?
No, I don't think so. And I think, times change, you see. In the 1950s and 60s, Singapore was very far left. The PAP had to shift to the left. And even within, this is happening all over the world. Before Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, the Europeans and North Americans were pretty centrist. In the middle, there was like slightly left, slightly right. Couldn't really tell the difference. Then with Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, there was this huge neoliberal consensus that came out,
Right.
see? And that has infected the whole world, see?
Right.
And now, in the last few years, you've had this extreme right wing in Brazil, in China, in the US, in the UK even with Brexit, see? So people change, and the pendulum kind of swings. And I think it's going to be really interesting what's happening in other parts of Asia. In Thailand, in Taiwan, India, correct. It's very hard to predict. See, the Congress party is in a mess in India, but the Bihar elections, you've seen parties from the left coming up, and so I think it's a matter of time. And of course, the big $64 million question is what's going to happen with BN and PN and PH in Malaysia.
Right. So you're saying it's a matter of time before more Singaporeans become
to the left, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
I think the pendulum has already swung so much. You see, from when the PAP first came to the power, they were very left. They had $30,000 HDB flats, $1 polyclinic visit. It was very much a socialist. They were part of Socialist International.
Right. And they were democratic
socialists.
Yeah.
Correct, and that's how they started. And then they swung to the right. So it's a matter of time, and you interviewed Cherian just yesterday. He's trying to argue that the PAP themselves can somehow magically swing back to the left. But for those of us who
skeptical.
Yeah, I am skeptical. But I'm reading Cherian's book, and it's a fabulous book. I'm 3/4 of the way through it, but I do think that until that happens, until the PAP goes back to being a democratic socialist party, there's a need. There's a huge gap, and people in Singapore want political parties who are able to enunciate a vision of democratic socialism, justice, equality, that kind of thing, civil liberties, basic human rights, stuff that PAP used to talk about.
Right. Okay. So for those who just joined, so we got a scoop that Prof. Tambyah was offered to join the WP and he rejected. So you're more of an ideologue, I would say.
Well, like I said, my wife thinks I'm more of an activist than a politician. Okay. So I've got certain causes. Things that I'm interested in: marginalized individuals, migrant workers, HIV/AIDS. That's actually how I got into activism in the first place. Prema was the vice president of Action for AIDS, and so that's how I interacted with her. And then she invited me to get involved with the Marua, and I was one of the founder members of Marua.
Okay, all right. Okay, so we've talked about the party ideologies. Let's talk about the party personalities.
Sure.
So, Dr. Chee Soon-Juan, right? So, he's a polarizing figure in Singapore society. And when I was growing up, and my students don't know my age, so I'll just be vague about this. But there was one particular scene in Singapore politics that plays in my mind over and over again, and it replays, where Dr. Chee was chasing then PM Goh Chok Tong and saying, Mr. Goh, come here, Mr. Goh, I want to talk to you, where's my $5 billion, where's our $5 billion, or something along those lines. And so the question is, has Dr. Chee's reputation been irreversibly damaged by that incident? Of course, the media was playing it up.
And in fact, if you look at the actual footage itself, you see that it was spliced together. And that was the days before social media, where everything was controlled by centrally. It was TCS at the time, or SBC, or whatever it was called, and that was just played over and over again, and without context. And in fact, people who were there, this guy who's not a great fan of Dr. Chee, when he describes the incident, he talks about what happened.
This is Lok Po
Yong, and it's quite different from the way it was portrayed. But even so, politics is a situation where you need accountability, and the question there was, what is the basis for the loan guarantee? And granted, there are ways of saying it and ways of doing it which may be somewhat different. But that was such a long time ago, and the fact that people still dredge it out, right? And the other interesting thing, my mom talks about it. People of her generation, in their 80s, they can remember that. But the young people, they don't. Right. And I think that's the big difference. The line of people, lining up at Bukit Batok MRT station during GE 2020, or in Boat Quay in GE 2015.
Right, I remember that.
And the vast majority of them are under 40, so they never even saw that.
Right. So
they were in kindergarten at the
I'm
time.
under 40 also, by the way.
But you're an academic. That ages you.
So you are saying that Dr. Chee is not really. He's not a dropback, as in he doesn't bring the party down.
No, and we have the cohort of people who are my mom's generation. True, they've been sort of coloured by the propaganda and the portrayal of Dr. Chee at the time. But what is really interesting is during the 2015 general election, we went to visit Tan Cheng Bock because he was in the constituency where we were contesting, and one of his grassroots people was there, and Cheng Bock said, my view of you, he was referring to Sun-Juan, he said, my view of you has done a 180-degree U-turn. So, and the grassroots leader said the same thing, and I said, what made the difference? And he said, and I don't know whether you remember this, there was actually a televised debate in the 2015 election, and Lawrence Wong was reading out a series of accusations against Dr. Chee. And it was interesting because Lawrence Wong didn't make eye contact with him, and it looked like he was asked to read out these accusations. And then Dr. Chee turned around and gave him a very polite and very civil response. So the grassroots leader said to me, he said, when Lawrence Wong read out those things, I half expected Dr. Chee to take the chair and bang it on his head, because I've been told that Dr. Chee is a psychopath, and that's what I've been inculcated to believe in. But when he turned around and answered him in a civilized manner, I was shocked. So then I started to ask myself, is it true, all the stuff that I've been told? And I think that's what Singaporeans need to do. And this is the benefit of social media. You get a chance to interact with people either in real life or through the online persona, and you see them being asked questions and you see how they behave, and then you see for yourself. You can make a judgment for yourself rather than depending on the filter that MediaCorp or SPH puts on the news or the personalities. So yeah, I know people in the 80s, they have this view of Dr. Chee, but frankly, I don't think the young people who have actually met him in person or who have interacted with him online, and he answers emails. He has got people to help him, but a lot of the time the difficult ones he will answer himself. And I just remember he did a really good reply just recently about the minimum wage.
Right. Okay. So you again, I'm paraphrasing, right?
Sure.
So what you're saying is SDP is not ready for a non-Chinese leader.
That is, I'm going to POFMA you on that one for sure.
Or SDP doesn't need a non-Chinese leader anymore.
No, I mean, I think that's ridiculous. SDP's chairman, okay, I took over as chairman from Wong Suk Yi. We have not had a Chinese male chairman for a very long time, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm saying, but the second
we had Wong Suk Yi, and then before that we had Jeffrey George, and then we had Jufri Mahmood, and
Jufri, yeah.
So the leadership of SDP has always been Singaporean as such. You see, as you know, it looks like Singapore. That's the whole point. You look at our CEC, it actually, we could do with a few more women.
I just wanted to say you could do it with a few more women, but I guess all the parties could. Right?
Yeah, correct.
All the parties could. Yeah. So you mentioned Dr. Tan Cheng Bock. Thanks for that answer. But I just want to say, ultimately, we can't really blame people for. They can only judge by what they see, right? They cannot judge by.
Yeah. So if you are 80 years old, you don't use the internet. Fair enough, you see. But you know, most people in their 50s, they like. The WhatsApp, you see, 50, 60-year-olds, they may not be on Facebook or Instagram, but they're using WhatsApp. And frankly, during the last GE, lots of Sunjuan's videos were going around on WhatsApp. My father-in-law, you know, some of his friends were sharing WhatsApps. This guy, the cultural medallion winner, Yang Pui Nyong, he did a video about Sun Juan, and that really did the rounds in the Chinese educated population. And so there was, so when people get to see for themselves, you know, I think they'll make up their mind.
So you think he can stay on for one more election at least?
Well, I think, you know, he'll stay on as long as he's needed to stay on. And the fact that the PAP is still so scared of him is quite...
do you really think they are?
I think they are. I mean, Goh Chok Tong in his book, Tall Order, he talks about how Lee Kuan Yew himself said that without the GRC, Teo Chee Hean may not win against Sun Juan. So, and Teo Chee Hean was the DPM, you know. So the fact that
at that time he wasn't, right?
No, he wasn't, but he rapidly became the DPM.
Right,
So he's somebody who, I mean, LKY obviously thought had the caliber to become a DPM. And then he thought that, you know, CSJ could defeat him. So so that clearly shows that they're scared of him. So I guess, I mean, it's good to keep them on their toes.
Okay. So moving on, you mentioned Dr. Tan Cheng Bock just now. So with the PSP around in the West and growing from strength to strength, apparently, do you think we still need SDP? Why not WP in the East and PSP in the West? And it solves a lot of problems for people. And people always say the opposition is divided. So how would you respond?
Yeah, I mean, you know, again, apart from the food in the West, which I'm not going to get into, the fact is that, you know, we work very closely with the PSP. In fact, Dr. Tan came and campaigned for me. I was quite surprised in Bukit Panjang. The day before cooling off day, he showed up in the hawker center, and he came and shook hands with people there, and he introduced himself as a friend of mine. He knew my father, and so we have very good. And I tried to repay the favor by buying a seat at their fundraising dinner, and they were very, very nice and sweet to me. So there's been good cooperation between PSP and SDP. And frankly, you know, Singapore is a small place, but there's plenty of opportunity for different political parties. And ultimately, it's like scientific data, I see. Some things will win out, and some things will not. And we are a very diverse population. So it's very likely that certain people, you know, will want to support the SDP. Some of them will support the PSP. And we have to give people a choice.
I would say it's my opinion. I think why I started off by saying that the SDP, I think, is still the second strongest party, is that I think the SDP's machinery is a bit more developed than the PSP, and at the moment the PSP is pretty much a Dr. Tan Cheng Bock party, and the PSP and their survival really depends on how Hazel and Manwai perform in Parliament, I think. Whereas
I'll correct you a little bit on that. In that, I went for I think it was the anniversary or the launch, this event at the Ban Heng in Harbourfront, and I was sitting with I can't remember who it was. I think maybe Gerald, and I said to them, "My goodness, this event looks like a PA event." And not only does it look like a PA event, it looks like a well-organized PA event. You know, I've been to PA events, some of which fall flat and some of which are well-organized. So, and he said, of course, it's the same people who run PA events.
Right.
So they do have a pretty impressive machinery. And I think this is actually an interesting comment, is that, the part of the reason why people feel that the PAP has alienated some of the population is because people are parachuted into the party. And then the so-called grassroots, or people who have been working the ground, sometimes are viewed as being sidelined. And again, I don't know how true that is, but that is the perception that I hear. So what the PSP has done is they have pulled out a lot of these people who used to work the ground, for the PAP in those days. So they know the nuts and bolts. They know how to run an event. They know how to, do identify the needy families, channel them to the CDCs and social service organizations, and all this kind of bread and butter politics in Singapore.
Okay, so we'll see how PSP performs in the next election, and interesting to see whether Dr. Tan will contest in the next presidential election and whether he'll still be around in PSP. So many unknowns.
Sure.
So the next one is you talked, can I say lovingly, about Pritam just now?
Hey, hello. Bring up romance.
So you talk kindly about Pritam. So would a coalition with WP be possible or necessary?
Well, I think, of course, we ultimately hope that the SDP is going to win, 51% of the seats in Parliament, but that's going to take a really long time. Okay, I think things will have to change in Singapore, things will have to change in the rest of the world. But we can never say never. A lot of things that people never expected, they occur, see. And so everywhere, all over the world, see. And I think it just we have to be open to all the possibilities.
Ooh.
Whatever they are.
Wow, I heard an invitation.
Yeah, you can join us. For example,
I heard a different invitation. Okay.
I got into trouble in 2015 for suggesting that a certain DPM might want to quit the party and join us and lead an opposition coalition. I was just making a joke, and my goodness, I got hit by a ton of bricks. It was just incredible.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
The poor guy. He used to reply to my emails, and then he stopped. But then during the by-election, he came and shook my hand. So the Bukit Panjang by-election, that was in the news quite a bit, and we talked about doing a fair fight. So yes, there is an invitation there to you and to our friend, the future IMF director.
So I think there will be more prawn noodles and carton between Prof and LO. So the final question I have, then maybe we can ask some of the audience questions. So in an SMC, did your ethnicity disadvantage you? Do you think if you were Chinese, it would push you just over the line, just give you the few thousand votes you need?
Oh no, I don't think so. I mean, you look at it, who did the best in the PAP? The Jurong GRC, right? Led by Tharman. You look even in Bukit Batok, the guy who's a full-time senior counsel managed to eke out a victory, despite all of the efforts that we put into it. The WP team in Aljunied has got 3 non-Chinese, only 1 Chinese male in their team. And you've got people like Kumaran Pillai, you've got Jose Raymond, all of them have done really well. I think Singaporeans have gone beyond race. There's only one political party that seems to have a problem with it.
Gone beyond race meaning what? What do you mean?
No, they look at the individual, they look at the party. I mean, Jose Raymond has been working the ground in
He came on before, and it was wild. He's just a colorful character.
Well, he's a media guy. So he knows.
He was interviewing me.
Yeah, exactly. So he knows how to play this game. But he's been working the ground. In fact, I think it was Adrian Kwa from LKY SPP who made the comment that he's actually becoming the de facto MP of Potong Pasir. And he said he's providing social services, and he's going to reach the point where Jose Raymond is going to start charging taxes.
Okay, so if I could push you a little on that, right?
Sure.
We know that from our lived realities, that people have not gotten beyond race, right? We know that we hear, some racial, sometimes racist comments, and even just couple of weeks ago, I was waiting for lift at one of the buildings in Tampines, and there were two Indian workers inside, and nobody wanted to come in.
Right.
So I don't know whether it's because foreign workers and because of
No, like
the
that's
pandemic.
COVID.
Yeah. So I don't know whether it's
Yeah.
because of that, whether
Yeah.
it's because of race, but
But they went into the lift with you, right?
no. So I went in with the two of them and
Right.
the others. So
Yeah.
I don't know if that is really the case, whether we have really moved beyond race. And if we have not moved beyond race as a society, right, then surely the PAP's justification has some validity in terms of if racism still exists in daily life, then it is possible that it would translate to voting patterns as well.
No, I don't think so. And the analogy I'm going to use is the Chee analogy. You see, because the establishment portrays Chee as a crazy man. You see, in fact, my wife had lunch with him in 2013, I think it was, and around the time of the Punggol East by-election. And after lunch, that was the first time she met him. After lunch, we walked away, and the first thing she said to me is, "He's a normal person." I said, "Yes, he's a normal person." But she said, everything I see in the media is that there's this crazy man here. So the establishment has divided us, you see, through the colonial period. There's the CMIO, the SAP schools, there's the rules on, religious headgear for certain religions, not for other religions. There's ethnic quotas in HDB estates, but not in condominiums. There's a quota for president, but there's no quota for Navy or the Air Force. So all of these things are structural things which are put in by the establishment. But in spite of that, the people can look beyond race. So what I'm trying to say is in spite of all the stuff that the PAP and the mainstream media says about Chee Soon-Juan, you have people willing to wait 1.5 hours to get him to sign their book, you see. So what the people do is, in spite of what they are told and what they have been conditioned or what they've been programmed to do, and this is the great part about Singapore, you see. We have all these rules. We have this reputation for being a country which is full of rules. But what that does is it creates very clever people who find ways to get around the rules. So, in fact, I think there is a healthy skepticism of the official narrative, which is manifested in lines of people waiting to get Soon-Juan to sign the book, and people who are willing to put more faith in Tharman than, say, some other PAP minister. So I think that this is the thing. See, despite the attempts by those in authority to divide and rule, Singaporeans are beyond that. See, so you have to distinguish, I think, between our official version of society or the way we are constructed, which I agree with you has not gone beyond race. As long as we have CMIO, we have every one of us has to carry an identity card which carries a race on it. See, so that is the official view. But when you talk to individuals, it's different. See, and granted, of course, every society, we're not in utopia. There are every society has people who are racist. There is old people who tell them, you better tell the kid, you better behave yourself, or the will come and catch you. Yeah, you see, that's very hard to deal with. See? But I cannot see a 20-year-old telling his 25-year-old telling his kid that. See, that is something the grandma will tell the kid. And it's like the generation of people who thought that Soon-Juan was this madman. See, eventually, when these people are exposed to social media or they're exposed to the reality of the lived experience that people have in a world which is increasingly diverse, and it's frankly, I don't see one of these right wing characters like we have in Brazil or in China or in the UK or US taking off over here, or even in India for that matter.
So maybe you're right that racist voting doesn't happen. Even if racism does exist, racist voting would not affect the elections. What about racial voting? Because it's not necessarily racist to want somebody of your own race, of your own culture. Like if I said, or if a female said, I'm voting for her because she's female and she may represent my aspirations, and probably we wouldn't think much of that, right? But when it comes to race, why would it be wrong for an elderly Chinese or even a younger Chinese to identify, and likewise for Malays and Indians, with somebody who looks and speaks like them and comes from the same culture?
Yeah, you see, I don't know whether you've read some of the comments coming out about Kamala Harris. You see,
I have.
Yeah, and so there are a lot of people who are celebrating the fact that she's the first black vice president, the first Asian American vice president. But on the other hand, from the left, you've got people who are saying, look, she's the one who was tough on crime.
Yes.
And she was pretty right wing in the way she was San Francisco district attorney.
Yeah. Which are all true, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, but again, the question is
right.
representation versus
right. That is not enough.
Exactly,
right,
it's not enough. You see, just to have a face that looks like you, they have to think like you.
Right. So people will still be skeptical.
Yeah, they will still be skeptical.
Okay, fine enough. So there is one question. So it seems like SDP is taking a different approach now. You are going for a more local than a national approach, and this is a risky strategy, right? Because in the next election, what if Bukit Panjang and Bukit Batok no longer exist?
Yeah.
Of course, because of population changes. I'm not saying anything. So what happens if they are no longer around?
Yeah,
this seems like a risky strategy on SDP.
Yeah, it is a risky strategy, but on the other hand, I think that the lesson of Sengkang cannot be unlearned. See,
right.
And the PAP is famous for learning lessons after the fact. See. So they see what happened in Sengkang. They took Punggol East, they took part of Ang Mo Kio, and they took part of what was it? There was another
Pasir Ris Punggol.
Yeah, Pasir Ris. Yeah, no, Punggol East. That was part of, and there were three different constituencies that came together and became Sengkang GRC, and then they lost it. You see, so they do realize that gerrymandering is a double-edged sword. See, that it can cut both ways. And the logical thing is if Bukit Batok gets swallowed up in Jurong GRC, Jurong GRC is already huge, and then the question is, are they going to be able to persuade Taman to keep standing again? See, and if he does, that's going to be a huge, then it's going to be even harder and harder for them not to allow him to become prime minister.
Right.
So it's not so simple as just like in the old days when they swallowed up Juchet. When Juchet became very close, it got swallowed up and Marine Parade GRC. So to swallow up Bukit Batok and to swallow up Bukit Panjang is not going to be easy because there will be consequences and there's always a possibility that they might lose another GRC. And frankly, once the PAP loses the GRC, I don't see them winning it back.
Right.
I don't see which minister is going to run in Sengkang. Can you tell me?
Does it need to be a minister?
If it's not a minister, then automatically it becomes a second-class GRC. Every other GRC is held by a minister. So
what if it's a retiring minister?
Yeah, that's a minister on the way out. See, so a minister who they are prepared to sacrifice, which I don't think they will. See, so far we haven't seen that without Julian. Right? In 2015, there was no minister who came up. 2020, same thing. See, they did not want to risk somebody who was of the ministerial status. So I'll be really surprised if they send a minister to Sengkang.
That's a very bold statement. Once the PAP loses the GRC, they are not going to win it back. Okay, so I was just wondering, based on what you said, then why didn't you contest in a GRC?
Yeah, so this is actually it's an interesting story, and this is not going to be a scoop for you because I think I've told this story before. Is that I was actually prepared to go to Holland Bukit Timah, but then when they called that we thought they might call the election in February, March, right? Soon after the Election Boundaries Review Committee, and we thought that was really bad. And then they called it in July, and no rallies. And it was pretty obvious. They could have called the election any time, up to April 2021. But they called the election when they thought they were going to wipe out the opposition. I sincerely believed it was going to be 2001 all over again. And so I was thinking that, in Holland Bukit Timah, it's a very hard thing to do without rallies. You have to, there's a huge amount of ground to cover. And so the suggestion was made by actually one of our CEC members. It wasn't by me. That we should that I should go to Bukit Panjang, and because I had walked the ground in Senja, which is right next to Bukit Panjang, I was not opposed to the idea, and so we actually took a vote, and I abstained from the vote. I said, I'm just going to let the CEC decide. Yes, I told that to Mediacorp. Yeah. Okay. Can't get this guy's head get too big with too many scoops. So I abstained from the vote, and eventually they decided that I should go to what do you call it, Bukit Panjang. And what I did was, before actually announcing it, I went with Walid, and we walked the ground, and I tried to see what kind of response I would get. I know that it's mainly an older population, and the demographics. There are a couple of BTOs in that area, but the majority are 30, 40-year-old flats. So it's different from Senja and Jelapang and some of the areas where I had walked in the past. It's probably closer to Gimel in terms of Kuala Bukit Timah, in terms of the demographics. And I was very pleasantly surprised. The response was very, very positive. And this was the week before nomination day. So with that kind of response, of course I was with Walid, who had been walking the ground there for some time. So when I got that kind of response, then I was more encouraged, and I said, yeah, okay, I'll go along with that idea.
Right. Okay. So final substantive question. So
sure.
So you are for abolishing the GRCs, right?
Right, definitely.
Right. So I remember there was this debate with Mr. Jufri Mahmood and Cham Sitong.
Yeah, correct.
This was on the GRCs.
Yeah.
And I show this often in class. And Mr. Jufri was saying that one of the ways to guarantee, this was to guarantee minority representation. Yes, and then the other one was, if the PAP has a prerogative, that's what he used to fill a Malay or an Indian, then the opposition would fill a Malay or an Indian, right? So the SDP had that chance, right, when Mr. Murali was fielded, and you could have gone to Bukit Batu, right? And you have been an all-Indian affair, and you could have set sort of a precedent in saying, look, we are championing the abolition of the GRCs, and these are the rules we're going to play by.
No, I think, I can't remember. I know that you've shown that video before, and other people have shown it, but the reality is, before the GRC came out, there was actually more minority representation in Parliament in Singapore. It's always been the case, you see. And this is the thing that even
though... That was before the EIP, right? So there were Malay majority areas.
It was before the EIP, but even despite that, you see, you had constituencies which were never Malay majority. Right. What they were was, this is the bizarre thing. Under the EIP, you have a constituency which is 70% Chinese and 20% Indian, and it's considered an Indian enclave. It's the only place in the world where 7 out of 10 people in that place are not of your ethnic group, and you're considered an enclave. It's all political. See, it's all a calculation in terms of the mathematical modeling as what it's going to take for the PAP to win. So in spite of the fact that, I think the last Malay majority constituency was in 1960 something. After that, the Malays never made up more than 45% of any constituency. But in spite of that, see, you had the PAP, you had the Workers' Party, you had all the parties fielding candidates of different, roughly similar to the population, with a slight over-representation actually of non-Chinese candidates.
Right. Okay. So let's end on a conciliatory note.
Sure.
So
you want another scoop?
Who is your favorite PAP MP currently?
I think that should be obvious, right? His father was an academic who taught me about pathology. Yeah. So other than the one I got in trouble, who I got in trouble for, it would probably be Louis Ng. And in fact, I run into him in the food court. I used to run into him in the food court every now and again. He's there with his wife and his kids. And he's somebody who, I think the PAP had a catch when they caught him, because he's somebody who feels about migrant workers, who feels about many of the issues which I'm concerned about. And the most recent one, which we've actually communicated about on Facebook, is this crazy idea of ranking of teachers. I'm sure you know what it's like. It's insane. I was at university ranking, and I told the administrator, the students a few years ago, they built in one of the canteens an altar to the bell curve god. Because they said the university believes in this bell curve, you see. And it's not just for the students, it's also for the faculty. They are ranked on a bell curve. So you can only give so many A's, so many B's, so many C's, see. So Louis has taken that up, and I think that's a good thing, because if you're ranked on a bell curve, then you do well by stepping on somebody else. You know, whereas if you're ranked on an absolute ranking, if the whole class is made up of geniuses, everybody gets an A. See, or, I mean,
but resources are limited, right? You still have to distribute them.
You still have to distribute them, but it's a fine balance. I mean, you've done grading before hundreds and millions of times, but the grade inflation versus trying to set a standard,
right.
and sometimes you get a class where it's just so much better than last year's class. And then you're stuck. You still have to give only a certain percentage of A's, a certain percentage of B's, a certain percentage of C's. And you think, good grief, this guy who got a C this year compared to last year's B, it's like night and day. See?
Right.
So, but because we're stuck in this, what do they call it? This the ranking system. And so I'm glad Louis has taken it up, and hopefully we'll get some response from.
So Louis was on a few episodes ago as well. Yeah. So that is such a safe answer, right? Every opposition or activist would say Louis is their favorite. So who is your favorite political office holder other than?
You're stretching it. I've already got Taman. I've got Louis. Well,
SN Taman will be everybody's favorite. So other than SN Taman and Louis, final one, and then we'll end. Yeah.
Now that one I really got to think. I mean, nothing
I
against.
thought we were going to
against,
end on the conciliatory. I remember the IPS session. You actually started your question, and that was the first and only time I met you before this. And you started the question by praising Minister Chan Jun Singh.
I can't remember that. Okay, to be honest, Minister Chan Chun Singh, he organizes these feedback sessions in Buona Vista, and I used to be on the mailing list for them, and so I went for a few of them, and they are quite interesting because he runs them. I would imagine the way he runs his commanders meetings in the military. See, so he gets people to talk, and people talk quite freely. And then after that, he writes some things on a whiteboard, and then he gives a lecture, which is what a general does, I guess. And he was quite friendly about that. But I think he's still constrained by the system, and he's not willing to break out. And I don't see why he should, because he has been part of the establishment, and these sessions that he does in Buona Vista CC, they're nice, they're fun, but they're just I think peripheral to the. I don't see them really making a huge difference in the way he's involved in policy and formulation. He's a good guy. I mean, as a person. I was in.
He's very sharp as well, right?
He is sharp.
People don't really see that side of him.
No, I think that's the his skill. Is he portrays himself as this man in the street kind of upping kind of character, but in reality he's a scholar. He's very sharp. I was in 3rd Division when he was the commander of 9th Division during my reservists, and we were fully aware of how sharp he was and how he his strategic thinking, and so no question about that.
Okay. Professor Paul, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And hopefully Dr. Chee will come on.
Yeah, I hope so too.
One.
Yeah.